The afternoon of 22nd November 1975 is a Saturday. Drummuckavall, a drumlin on the County Louth border, 3 kilometres southeast of Crossmaglen, County Armagh. A slope behind bushes. Below, a small stream that marks where Northern Ireland ends and the Republic begins. Around, farmland that looks open from every direction and provides cover for nobody. Or rather, that provides the same cover equally, depending on which side of the border you are standing on. 4 men have been in position here since 2 in the morning the previous day. They deployed from Crossmaglen in the dark and set up on the slope without being seen, or so they believed. It isn't a sophisticated arrangement. It's what 4 men improvise when they have been given a quick briefing before being sent out and don't have the proper equipment. It was also, in November 1975, the standard approach for rural observation posts in South Armagh. The army had been doing it this way across the border for years. The man coming off watch says something to Lance Corporal Paul Johnson, 9 Platoon, C Company, 3rd Battalion, Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. Johnson has barely enough time to react. At 16:20, automatic fire opens from 2 positions simultaneously. The position is blown before the first round lands. The IRA has known where the post is since the previous afternoon, within hours of the 4 men settling in. Local eyes spotted them during daylight on 21st of November and passed the information to the Provisional IRA's South Armagh Brigade. The attack came roughly 24 hours after compromise, enough time to reconnoitre the ground, identify firing positions south of the border, and assemble a unit that secondary accounts and RUC intelligence records place at up to 12 men. The inquest later confirmed both firing positions were inside the Republic of Ireland. 12 armed men, 2 firing lines, immunity from immediate British pursuit, and a day of preparation. On the other side, 4 men, a ground sheet flapping in the wind, and no head nets. The 3 Fusiliers who die at Drummuckavall on 22nd of November 1975 are Fusilier James Duncan, 19 years old, from Oldham; Fusilier Peter MacDonald, 19, from Manchester; and Fusilier Michael Sampson, 20. They hold the rank of Fusilier, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers equivalent of private. The rank is confirmed in Ministry of Defence casualty records, the Kane-Sutton Index of Deaths, and multiple independent secondary sources. Johnson, the OP commander, is their Lance Corporal. 50 years later, Johnson will recall all 3 of them as 19. The official records give Sampson as 20. The discrepancy is the kind that 5 decades of difficult memory produce. Honest, not careless, and the record should carry both. What the record settles precisely: their names, their unit, their ages as documented, and the date. MacDonald is the only man on active guard duty when the IRA opens fire. He is manning a light machine gun, the section's automatic weapon, the standard fire support tool for a British infantry 4-man group in this period. Duncan and Sampson are resting or eating. The OP is 4 men on one site, bunched together, exposed, within sight of several houses. The IRA attack unit numbers up to 12, drawn from the South Armagh Brigade, and has had an entire day to prepare. Johnson survives the first burst unscathed. He goes flat. A voice calls on him to surrender. He does not. He turns. He picks up his rifle and fires back. A second call to surrender is made. More automatic fire follows immediately. Johnson is hit in the wrist, in his side, and in the back. He stops moving. He lies still. He hears men running away from the position. He hears them shouting, "Up the RA!" He hears them laughing. Then the hillside is quiet. 3 of the 4 are dead. One is badly wounded, lying among them, not moving. The forensic picture recovered by the follow-up investigation was specific. Rounds had covered the entire area of the position, not a single point of it. The IRA unit didn't know precisely where Johnson was, so they covered everything. All 4 men were struck multiple times. One of the others was still alive, briefly, and Johnson could hear him. He put a hand on the man. The sounds stopped. The IRA unit had fired from at least 2 positions, a later inquest found, and both were inside the Republic of Ireland, across a border that offered perfect cover and immunity from any immediate British pursuit. The weapons used included AR-15 rifles. One of them, forensic examination later established, had already been used in the Tullyvallen Orange Hall massacre on the 1st September 1975, when 5 Protestant civilians were shot dead. The attack at Drummuckavall and the sectarian attack at Tullyvallen were linked by the same weapon passing through the same hands, attributed in the Tullyvallen case to a cover name, the South Armagh Republican Action Force, used by the same organizational network. No one has ever been charged or convicted specifically for what happened on the Drummuckavall hillside. Johnson's account of what he does next, given in a filmed interview decades after the event, is worth following precisely. The sequence of decisions he makes, and the one he can't, is the technical heart of what the army eventually changed. The radio has been disabled by the gunfire. He forms a plan instead. He crawls approximately 25 yards toward the nearby road, seriously wounded, moving at whatever pace his injuries allow. British forces find him. A helicopter lifts him off the hillside. South Armagh, by 1975, was already deeply helicopter-dependent for casualty evacuation, because IRA ambushes on vehicle convoys along several routes had made road movement prohibitively dangerous. He is taken to hospital in Belfast. The surgery works. His hand, by his own account, is steady. A Royal Engineer convoy passes through Crossmaglen that night on its way to the position. C Company's reaction force gets off aircraft at the site with men shouting on top of the hill in the dark. The company medic rolls Johnson over. The wound to his back, by Johnson's account, is described to him as only a scratch. The open helicopter door in the cold South Armagh November air, the operating theatre, the body shaking, the hand steady. The contrast between what Johnson experienced in the 48 hours after 22nd of November and what a similarly wounded soldier might experience a decade later, with better doctrine, better communications discipline, and better mutual support built into the operation from its planning stage, isn't incidental to this story. It's the story. To understand why Drummuckavall was foreseeable rather than simply unlucky, South Armagh in November 1975 needs to be understood as a specific operational environment, not generic Northern Ireland countryside. The South Armagh Brigade of the Provisional IRA, operating across a tight-knit rural community where the Irish border runs through farm fields with no physical marking and minimal natural features distinguishing one side from the other, has by this point killed at least 123 British soldiers in the South Armagh area since internment began in August 1971. Roughly a fifth of all military casualties across the province. The brigade's intelligence network is local and immediate. Every British soldier who walks out of Crossmaglen base enters a community where news of his presence travels through established channels faster than he can relocate. The terrain compounds the problem. Drumakaval itself is a drumlin, a rounded hill of glacial drift, which means it has natural observation lines in multiple directions simultaneously, making it difficult to establish a position that can't be seen from at least one civilian vantage point. The border stream below the OP marks a legal line, but not a physical barrier. An IRA unit could assemble on the southern side, take firing positions in the Republic, engage the British Army across the border, and withdraw before any legal British pursuit could follow. The inquest into Drummuckavall confirmed the firing positions were inside the Republic. This wasn't an accident of geography. It was a deliberate tactical exploitation of a legal constraint the British Army couldn't overcome by conventional means. By November 1975, the 1975 IRA British ceasefire has effectively collapsed. Violence in South Armagh is described in contemporaneous accounts as spiralling, and British road movement in the area is increasingly helicopter-dependent. Even helicopter operations are contested. IRA mortar attacks on bases and aircraft are an established feature of the environment. An IRA South Armagh Brigade chapter timestamp from an October 2024 interview with a former IRA South Armagh man describes the helicopter dependency and no-road policy, by 1975 already significant, as a product of the IRA's deliberate campaign to make vehicle movement untenable. During the 3rd Battalion Royal Regiment of Fusiliers South Armagh tour, 16 weeks, from 16th August to 16th December 1975, 6 soldiers from the battalion are killed by IRA actions. 3 of them die at Drumakaval. Sergeant Simon Francis, also of 3 RRF, is killed in South Armagh on 21st of November 1975, the day before the Drummuckavall ambush, in a separate incident. MOD casualty records confirm this date and cause of death. 2 battalion fatalities in 24 hours from the same unit and the same area is part of what makes specific dates unstable in veteran memory a half-century later. It's also a measure of the operational pressure the battalion was absorbing. The ground at Drumakaval had already been paid for once before any of these men arrived. On 13th August 1974, 15 months before Johnson's 4-man team deployed, an IRA remote-controlled bomb destroyed a British Army observation post at the same location. 2 soldiers died in that attack. The IRA had demonstrated at this specific townland on the County Louth border that a static British observation post could be detected, identified as a target, and destroyed. The 1974 incident was a different attack method, remote detonated explosive rather than automatic fire, but it achieved the same result by the same mechanism, locating the position, waiting, and hitting it. Whatever institutional memory existed about Drumakaval as ground where static OPs were comprehensively vulnerable, it didn't change the decision to send a 4-man team to the same location in November 1975 with a quick briefing and improvised equipment. The 1975 post wasn't the first to die on that hillside. That distinction belongs to the soldiers of August 1974. The 1975 post was the one that finally changed the doctrine. The Army's own follow-up report on the Drummuckavall attack was explicit about what had gone wrong. Harnden's Bandit Country, the authoritative published account of the IRA in South Armagh, quotes the report's findings directly. The OP had been established in darkness on a slope behind bushes overlooking a stream running along the border. Lance Corporal Johnson and the 3 Fusiliers had been bunched together on a single site. The site was exposed and within sight of several houses. None of the soldiers was wearing a combat jacket or head net. A ground sheet had been flapping in the breeze. The report produced a line that reads, from the distance of 50 years, as the British Army speaking to itself about how completely it had misunderstood the operational environment it was sending men into. Remember, in South Armagh, it's no use removing local vegetation to provide cover. Locals will soon spot that. The conclusion was plain. The casualties, the report stated, had been the result of bad camouflage, wrong routine, and incorrect OP layout. 3 errors. 3 men dead from a unit that had been given a quick session before going out. The follow-up report named the mistakes precisely and publicly. What it couldn't name yet was the system that would prevent those same mistakes from being made again, because that system didn't yet exist. A question that has appeared consistently in comment sections and veteran discussions concerns the date. Was it the 22nd or the 23rd of November 1975? The ministerial statement recorded in Hansard on 24th of November 1975 refers explicitly to the death of 3 soldiers at an army observation post in South Armagh on Saturday 22nd November. The 22nd of November 1975 was indeed a Saturday. The Ministry of Defence's own casualty records list Duncan, MacDonald and Sampson, all with a date of death of 22nd November 1975. The Kane-Sutton Index of Deaths, the standard academic casualty chronology for the conflict, records the same date, the same location, and the same cause. Every secondary source that gives a specific date gives the 22nd. No documentary source places the attack on the 23rd. The most credible explanation for veteran memory, sometimes placing the event differently, is the death of Sergeant Simon Francis the day before. 2 separate battalion fatalities in 24 hours, in memories now 50 years old. Some veterans recall the 21st, some the 23rd. The official record, from Parliamentary Statement, MOD file and the Kane Index, is unambiguous. Saturday, 22nd November 1975. The standard account of what Drummuckavall produced ends with the SAS deployment. That account is accurate. It's also half the story. Shortly after the attack, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland Merlin Rees issued a statement formally labelling South Armagh bandit country. The phrase became the defining shorthand for the area for the remainder of the conflict and beyond. In January 1976, the British government officially announced that the SAS was being deployed in Northern Ireland, specifically in South Armagh. SAS elements had already been operating in the area unofficially, but the Drumakaval follow-up report and the pattern of failures it documented was part of the documented case for formalising and expanding that presence. The report's conclusion that normal soldiering and conventional fieldcraft skills were proving inadequate in this specific environment was, Harnden writes, tacit acknowledgement of a problem the army could no longer address through standard infantry methods. But the SAS deployment, as Harnden notes directly in Bandit Country, was a finite resource that was soon being used throughout Northern Ireland. One specialist unit, however capable, couldn't cover South Armagh's dozens of border fields and surveillance requirements across a 30-year campaign. The province needed something with larger scale, a trained covert observation capability drawn from regular infantry battalions but specifically schooled in the disciplines that the Drumakaval follow-up report had defined, by their absence, as prerequisites for survival. In 1977, Major General Dick Trant established close observation platoons, COPs, within the British Army's Northern Ireland structure. This is documented both in Harnden's account and in a separate document authored by Colonel E.D. Brown, MBE, a senior officer with direct experience of the period. Harnden's text states it plainly. This led to the establishment of close observation platoons, COPs, by Major General Dick Trant in 1977. As well as carrying out surveillance, COPs, which are tasked by RUC Special Branch rather than by the Army, have also been used in South Armagh to mount ambushes. Colonel Brown's document, archived publicly, confirms. Originally established in 1977, they provided static covert observation in support of the police throughout the province. COPs operated until August 2007, when Operation Banner ended and the last platoon stood down after 30 years. 2 years separate November 1975 from 1977. The gap between what the Fusiliers had at Drummuckavall and what a COP team carried when it went out to watch a border field in the early 1980s was the difference between improvisation and doctrine. What the doctrine actually prescribed is where the specific errors of Drummuckavall appear in reverse. No cooking, cold rations only, because steam from a heat source is visible at 200 metres in South Armagh air. No movement above the skyline, no speech above a whisper. Strict noise discipline extending to coughing, to turning pages, to any sound that carries in still early morning air. All bodily waste contained and removed from the position. Not buried near the site, not left in place. Carried out in sealed bags at extraction. Sleep in full kit. Eyes on the arc at all times. Positions concealed with materials native to the surrounding environment and not arranged in patterns that would be visible to local eyes who know every field on their family's land. Mutual support. No position operating without at least the theoretical ability of a paired position to react to its compromise. The dispersal that the Fusiliers' single-site arrangement had fatally failed to achieve was now a structural requirement. One post compromised didn't mean one post overrun without warning. Dispersal, communication discipline, and mutual support together created the redundancy that 4 bunched men with a flapping ground sheet had not had. And training measured in weeks, not a quick session beforehand. Ralph Brooker served with British forces in Fermanagh, Derry and South Armagh. In October 2024, he appeared on the Good Listener podcast, episode 98, nearly 2 hours, describing in detail the British Army's constant attempts to counteract the IRA's evolving methods and tactics in rural border terrain. The podcast's own chapter markers reference his time in close observation platoons by name. He is, in that recorded conversation, exactly the kind of soldier the COP structure was designed to produce. Someone who went to the border fields with specific training, specific equipment, and specific doctrine, rather than a quick briefing and improvised kit. He left a comment on Johnson's filmed account. In it, he wrote, "The whole rural OP ethos changed as a result of Drumakaval. By 1982, covert surveillance and hard routine, with heavy mutual support, had been seriously refined." Then he added a line that belongs in any honest account of institutional change in the British Army. "Even then, we had to buy our own extreme weather kit." His spelling, Drummuckavall rather than Drumakaval, is worth noting only because it reflects the phonetic variation that any soldier who heard the name spoken rather than read it might produce. The townland's formal spelling is Drummuckavall. His point isn't about spelling. His claim is also not a document. It's first-hand testimony from a soldier who served in the environment the doctrine was designed to cover, 7 years after the ambush that helped produce it. It should be understood as exactly that: a veteran's assessment of change from inside the change at the earliest point it was visible. It's corroborated by the documentary timeline. COPS established 1977, Brooker's service 1982. 5 years of institutional embedding between the founding and the point where a practitioner could assess the refinement. Another commenter on Johnson's account, who identified himself as a COP course graduate, wrote, "We were taught about this incident on COP course. Lot of lessons learnt from it." No release document confirms that Drummuckavall appears by name in a formal COP syllabus. But it is precisely the kind of case study a doctrine built around specific identified errors would use. And the errors the follow-up report catalogued were specific enough to teach: bad camouflage, wrong routine, incorrect OP layout. Each one a lesson. Each one a heading in a training program about what survival in South Armagh actually required. The doctrine's refinement wasn't a linear improvement to perfection. In July 1981, at Glasdrumman, 4 kilometres from Drummuckavall along the same borderline, a Royal Green Jackets COP team was ambushed after apparently being compromised within the first day of its insertion. Lance Corporal Gavin Dean was killed. The Army's follow-up concluded that local civilians had seen the team almost immediately. 6 years of COP training and doctrine, and South Armagh's eyes were still faster than the insertion. The methods were better. The environment was unchanged. The broader trajectory held. The Glasdrumman ambush prompted its own follow-up. The specific failure, insertion compromise by civilian observation, was the same failure that had killed the Fusiliers, and it reinforced what the training had already identified as the fundamental difficulty: a tight-knit rural community where any unfamiliar presence registers within hours can't be penetrated by teams that local people can spot. The answer, developed further into the 1980s and beyond, was insertion methods that removed the window of local observation almost entirely. Helicopters that touched a back lane for seconds in the dark and climbed away, leaving behind a soldier who didn't move until the rotor noise was gone, and who wouldn't move visibly again for days. The community couldn't identify what it couldn't see arrive. 14 Intelligence Company, operating from the late 1970s onward with covert teams in South Armagh, developed precisely these insertion methods. Its operators went out with purpose-built concealment equipment, cold ration packs calculated for the duration of the insertion, waste management systems, and communication protocols that assumed the radio might be the first thing compromised. The coax lead failure that Johnson couldn't diagnose in the field, the one fault that in a different circumstance might have brought help faster, was the kind of vulnerability a trained COP operator going out in the early 1980s would have been specifically drilled to check and to fix. The capability that eventually emerged from this process, a single operator, days of food and water, inserted in darkness, maintaining a position for extended periods and extracted alive, bore no resemblance to what Johnson and the 3 Fusiliers had improvised in November 1975. 4 men, no training worth the name, dead in 36 hours. Against that, 1 man, weeks of specific preparation, a helicopter insertion and extraction timed to seconds, and days of survivable concealment. The distance between those 2 points is the distance the doctrine covered. No document states it in those precise terms. The distance is there in the record, regardless. A question the record can't settle with certainty concerns what exactly was taught in the COP course's first decade, which specific incidents were given names in training, and whether the 3 fusiliers and their lance corporal appear in any syllabus document that has been released or described by someone in a position to know. The veteran testimony available, including the comment from a COP course graduate identifying Drummuckavall explicitly as taught material, points in one direction. Until a syllabus document is produced, this is veteran testimony consistent with institutional practice, not a confirmed record. What is confirmed is the structure of causation. An ambush that produced a follow-up report that named specific errors that were the precise inverse of what the doctrine subsequently required. Whether the army taught Drumakaval by name or absorbed its lessons by other means, the lessons were the same lessons. Paul Johnson was 20 years old when the automatic fire opened at 16:20 on 22nd of November 1975. In his filmed account, he is asked whether he would do anything differently. He does not reach for absolution. He says yes, of course he made mistakes, he can see them now, looking back. He lists them honestly and specifically. A soldier who reflects like that after 50 years isn't looking for sympathy. He is doing the thing the follow-up report did, naming the errors precisely. And then he says the other thing. The auto-transcript of his filmed testimony captures him at the conclusion. The big mistake was sending us down. The audio makes the meaning unmistakable. Not the mistakes he made in the position, not the decisions he made under fire. The decision made above him, before the insertion began, to send 4 men with a quick session and improvised kit to a hillside above a border stream in a townland where a previous post had been bombed 15 months earlier. 4 men, 1 hillside, a ground sheet flapping in the wind. An army report that later described the outcome as the result of bad camouflage, wrong routine, and incorrect OP layout. Sent out anyway. Everything that came afterward, the COP structure, the hard routine disciplines, the mutual support requirements, the purpose-built equipment, the insertion methods calibrated to seconds, the operator lying undiscovered in a border field for days at a time, all of it exists because of an afternoon when none of it existed yet. The doctrine was written in the space this went wrong. Its authors didn't survive to read it. Paul Johnson did. He is still here to know that his name, and the names of the men he was with, are part of what the men who came after were taught. Fusilier James Duncan, Fusilier Peter MacDonald, Fusilier Michael Sampson, 9 Platoon, C Company, 3rd Battalion, Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. Killed in action at Drummuckavall, 22nd of November 1975.